Hi, everybody, and welcome to another session of Female Disruptors. So today I have Tamie Rising as our female disruptor guest, who is going to share all the ins and outs of boundaries and burnout. And Tamie is a business coach. She's very inspirational. I've known her for a couple of years. And Tamie, I'm just going to let you give a little bit more insight about your background and your book that's coming out.
Yes, great. Thanks for having me. So I am an executive coach, been working with CEOs, entrepreneurs, high-level executives for about 10 years now, helping them really overcome burnout, and organizations helping them thrive with creating a culture that doesn't celebrate burnout.
Yes. And, I'm just going to bring this little story up. If you could share, we were on a call together a couple of days ago, and you were talking about an example of how you created boundaries for one of your clients. And I think that's a great starting point. If you could just share that story with us.
Sure. So third quarter of last year, I was really assessing what is 2023 going to look like for me, and what do I want to focus on. And what I did was I started looking at my numbers as a business owner myself, and what hours am I spending with each client, and how do I want to continue working. What I identified is I was spending 40 hours a month with a client that I wasn't working with in coaching, I was working in consulting with. And great relationship with these gentlemen, a 60-some-year-old, a 70-some-year-old, known them a very long time, worked with them for 5 years, and decided that it was time to step back. So we had a conversation and we said, hey, I'm going to work for the next 2 months with you. The agreement is through the next 2 months to end in November. I will help find and hire the replacement, and then I am shifting on to something else. That transpired, and then what happened was requests kept coming in for more help, really, without having an agreement in place. So initially I set the boundary for my calendar and my well-being because it was impacting my health. That's why I started looking at the hours in the first place, knowing what I had coming up for 2013. And so that was the initial boundary, was to let that client go, support my health. But then after letting them go, it became very obvious to me very quickly that I needed to continue to set the boundary of the client that I wasn't working with, wanting me to continue to help in the transition without a working agreement and any sort of expectation on the time it was going to take. And when there was a no on my boundary, it wasn't accepted at that time. And so I had to go to the next step and and communicate more directly about what I could do and what I couldn't do. And what I found in communicating that very directly was that I had a little bit of boundary hangover. Like, ooh, should I have not been that direct? As women, we know sometimes there's not a lot of value on being very direct. So I had that boundary hangover, kind of like a vulnerability hangover, and just remembering and staying very grounded that, no, I made that decision for me. And in order to disrupt the pattern, because I'd had boundaries, I'd had opportunities in those 5 years to set those boundaries. This wasn't like different behavior that they were doing with me and asking for work. I was always asked last minute to do work and always expected to turn it around quickly, and I could. With
So
them not being a client. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it seems like you created bad habits that people just became accustomed to and just took it for granted. So I think, we were talking behind the scenes before we started about, setting boundaries. I wish I had set boundaries with clients 10 or 15 years ago, because it would have been compounded in efficiency and a lot less stress and, more quality time for myself if I would have done it earlier, versus this hamster wheel of not having boundaries, which leads to burnout, right?
Absolutely. And it's a chapter in my book that'll be released later this year, because they're hard to set, but they're so critical to preventing burnout.
And I think that how you're relating boundaries and burnout is such a great way to frame it. So let's just talk about boundaries, because without boundaries, I mean, burnout has become probably, I'm surprised it didn't get word of the year in 2022 for most Googled or most searched or most used, because 2 years ago, burnout wasn't, as mainstream and such a word that it is today. And maybe it wouldn't be if we had some of these boundaries that you're going to talk about in place and tell us how boundaries can disrupt our future in a positive way.
They can. Do you know that recent studies show that 42% of employees quit a job to avoid burnout?
I believe it.
42%, that's almost half the workforce that recognize they're getting close to that, or maybe they don't even call it burnout when they're quitting, but that they know something is not right, that doesn't jive with them.
Yes. Yes. I can totally relate to that. So what can we do? Like, what are some of the things that we can do as, personally? And then also, I think we're going to also talk about what can we do if we're an entrepreneur or if we're in a leadership role to help our team avoid burnout, or even our family avoid burnout.
Such a good question. There's a lot of different answers, and I'll offer some really important ones. One is, like I was telling you, know your numbers. Know what your numbers are. Know how many hours you're spending on certain projects and certain tasks. Compare those to your results. When I got really clear that I was working 40 hours a month with this client, that helped me see the real picture. It's easy to keep striving and keep going, but not actually assess the real picture, because you can't deny it at that point. My health is suffering, it's being impacted X number of hours. So know your numbers. And if you're working for an organization, think about it as a leader, looking to reward for performance, not for hours. This is a subtle shift. A lot of organizations, they don't realize that they're measuring hours, thinking that's what gets results. So when you're working 50 hours or more a week, this is for anybody, your productivity declines every hour after that. Each hour. And when you get above 55 hours, it's virtually pointless. So to help us start to set boundaries, we have to shift our thinking. A lot of the culture right now is more is more. If I work more hours, I'll get more results. How about thinking to get the results that we want in our work and in our home life? Think about scheduling smart and working smart. So one thing we can do that I like to do on Sundays is to block my calendar for my time first, or I'll even do it by the month. So that's one tool to set an initial boundary. If my calendar is blocked, I have to think twice about accepting an invitation. The other thing is, if somebody does ask you something, pause. It is a knee-jerk reaction, especially as women, to want to meet expectations. We can get a lot of shit done. Is it okay to say that? We can get shit done. And if we have a back-to-back calendar every single hour, and somebody says, can you do this? And we think, oh, it takes 5 minutes. So we'll add another 5 minutes, but where is that 5 minutes going to have to come from? Personal time, family time, sleep time. And if you think about saying yes 10 times, that's 50 minutes we've just added to our calendar. I'll read this very, very briefly. It's Anything You Want by Derek Sivers. And listen to this when you are pausing before saying yes to something. There's no yes, it's either hell yeah or no. I need my readers. Use this rule if you're often overcommitted or too scattered. If you're not saying hell yeah about something, say no. When deciding whether to do something, if you feel anything less than, wow, that would be amazing, absolutely, hell yeah, then say no. That's why I said yes to this. I got a hell yeah when
hell yeah.
Hell yeah. When you say no to most things, you leave room in your life to really throw yourself completely into that rare thing that makes you say hell yeah. Every event you get invited to, every request to start a new project, you're not saying hell yeah. If you're not saying hell yeah about it, say no. We're all busy. We've all taken on too much. Saying yes to less is the way out.
You know what's so sad but awesome about what you just said is that for those that say yes to everything, then when they want to say hell yeah, their schedule is too packed to participate, or they're too tired. So if you just say hell yes, hell yeah, I mean, then you're going to have room for all those others that maybe when you're overcommitted, you can't do.
Some of the deeper reasons, I'll just get right into it, Lisa.
Yeah.
Some really deep reasons. You can Google lots of reasons why we don't set boundaries, and reasons that you, in ways that you can. But I want to get into some deeper stuff here.
Yes.
It's going to change the game for you. As a transformation coach, I work with our mindset and what we're thinking about that causes us or drives us to make the decisions, basically our motivations. So one of the deeper reasons is that, and this is a big one, I was just having this conversation this morning with some clients, is that if our success or our work is our identity, it makes it very hard to put up those boundaries. There's nothing wrong with it being our identity, our work being our identity. But if we are striving to prove something to the world, then when will we ever stop to actually do something for ourselves? So we want to think about the driver here. Sometimes it's also a belief. We have a societal belief, like I said before, is more is equals more. I would invite disruptors, challenge yourself. Do I need to work in one more hour? Is that going to give me that many more results? What I like to think about is a strategy here, just a practical strategy, is to, at the beginning of every day, schedule your top 3 priorities. Literally block them on your calendar. Now, if your calendar is booked out, you'll have to do this once a month or once a quarter. Block your calendar. And then when you get there, turn off all the distractions and focus only on that. Now, here's where the boundaries come into play. If that's on your calendar, and this is what you've decided for what's important for the day, what happens when somebody asks you to do something right at that time? Are we driven to meet the expectation of somebody else, or are we really focused on what is important to us? The other thing is our conditioning. So if we weren't supported as young children growing up to have a voice or to have choice, and we were really taught to meet others' expectations and what their needs are important, that is also another reason why we may not be willing or able to set a boundary. Because what's happening is this internal conditioning system is making our decisions for us, even though we know at the end of the day, gosh, I just don't want to be living this way. I don't want to be getting to the end of my day feeling so frazzled and spent. But what I encourage you to do is disrupt the norm of saying yes to everything. And keep in mind that the number one rule for setting boundaries is to have more concern about how it's going to affect you today and next year than what the potential consequence is going to be. Feel more concerned, to be more focused on that. It's not a selfish thing, but it's how we give our best work. If we said yes to every project, I work with a lot of corporate clients, and invite them to push back with their leaders. And the way we can push back influentially is to challenge, ask questions. How does this contribute to my project? And so forth. So I'm kind of getting off on some different things here, but I want to pause and see if there's any questions, or if you have anything you want to add to that, Lisa.
One of the things I wanted to add to that, and I just put in the chat about if anybody has any questions to put in the chat, but I know that the statistics are higher for women than men when it comes to burnout. And, I don't know the statistics offhand, but I'm sure you do, that women have a harder time setting the boundaries. So women have a higher rate of burnout. And also women probably set boundaries, they're not as good at it as men. Men seem to set boundaries in different ways where they're not as maybe impacted, it seems like, and passionate about something, that they're able to more, I think the word is detach themselves from things. And I think detachment I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And detachment is one way to help you set boundaries without feeling so emotionally like I have to say yes to everything. So what do you think about that concept of detachment?
I love that detachment. And it's actually why we want the numbers. We want the data on how much time we're spending. And, for the entrepreneurs out there, how much money that's bringing you for the time spent. We want to understand those things because we can be less attached. I was more attached when I didn't know my numbers and how it's going to affect the overall success of what I'm doing, what my clients are doing, because time was being taken away.
Yeah.
With the other time spent doing something that actually wasn't really fulfilling me anymore.
Yeah.
So we want to do a pulse check on what's actually fulfilling for us too at that time. The other thing I would say is, our country, it's founded on, a patriarchy of oppression and influence and power. And we can disrupt that and create systems that are have power for all when we bring that feminine influence of empathy and nurturing and compassion and time for self. But as women, so much of our role is doing for others that we, yes, the statistics are much higher for women than men. And I don't have the exact number with me right now, but they're pretty high up there. There's not as much for men, again, emotional attachment to maybe what others expect of us.
Yeah. We have a question from Allison. She's asking, are there any productivity tips or techniques that you can use to work more efficiently to avoid burnout?
Yes,
We have a couple questions on burnout. So just addressing burnout maybe more specifically.
Okay. Burnout. So the strategy earlier about your daily 3 is a huge game changer, and it helps you stay really focused and convicted on what you're doing that day. Because if we know what we're up to that day and we're committed to that, we're actually more aware of what time we do have or don't have, and less likely to fill in extra time. When I don't block my calendar, visually it looks like I'm completely open, but what I know is I have a lot to do. Now, one of the productivity hacks that I like to give people is challenge yourself that if you think, because see, again, more time does not equal a better, higher value. And so if you're wanting to get something done and you think it's going to take you 2 hours, challenge yourself to 90 minutes. Why? Because you get out of your head, you get your good ideas and your creativity out, and challenge yourself to have a time limit on that without distractions. Now, research shows that when we multitask, what's happening is we don't just come right back to the task. It takes us 5 or 10 minutes just to get our mind wrapped around the thing that we were doing before. So if we think we're multitasking in 2 hours to get 2 projects done, the quality is down because we're back and forth and we're not giving that creativity to it because we're distracted with the other thing. That's one of the productivity tips that I would
One of the ones I can add to that is along the lines of what you're recommending. I started doing this about 2 years ago, and I block off Mondays and Fridays where I don't have any calls. So I don't say to my clients or anybody, oh no, I don't do calls or Zoom on Monday and Friday. I'm only available Tuesday through Thursday. I don't really like bring it to the attention. So when I share a calendar link, those are the days that you can book. So that gives me this buffer of those days that I can kind of get shit done, whether it's work or play or whatever. So that's one thing that I did that is like a huge shift. And then another thing I did was on my calendar invite. So instead of doing 30-minute meetings, I do 20. And instead of doing 60-minute meetings, I do 50. So you're like, it's amazing how you can actually get a meeting done in 15 minutes if you have that much time blocked off and not give them the full hour to take and talk,
Exactly, because if we give ourselves more time, we're going to fill it.
Yeah.
Is it productive and is it efficient? Yes, a lot of my calls I will have at 30 minutes some an hour, but that focus gets you right to the point very quickly. And meetings are a great place to start with that. Lisa, I've done that too recently with the Monday and Friday block off. What I like about using Calendly or a calendar kind of a link system is that you get to decide. And so when I send my calendar links out, I'm very diligent about looking at my calendar and when people can and can't block. And I feel, instead of being ruled by other people's expectations, I become the ruler of my well-being and my calendar. And even when you're working for somebody else, I challenge my corporate clients to put on their calendar, block it for strategic thinking time. So many people don't have that kind of time because they're too busy doing and executing. Well, what you can do in strategy time, that you block that out, your employers are going to appreciate that. That can be downtime for 30 minutes. It can be, because here is the truth. When we're trying hard to get something done and get those inspired ideas in those solutions, we actually get more access to them when we're not working so much and when we are rested. I get my best ideas when I'm out walking or talking with friends. So there is a reason for the downtime and the rest. And it's not just for us to avoid burnout, but it actually improves the quality of our work. So if anything, take some breaks throughout the day to have conversations with people. Let them be fun. Let them be social. You can be talking about work, and also you might get a great idea that saves you a bunch of time. So don't equal having longer bits of work time with higher quality, because you can create higher quality with less and more focus.
Yeah, I think that's where that comes in, that statistic where, people that work really, really well under deadline, when you give yourself, you don't start thinking until it's like the last minute. So just give yourself less time from the beginning and your output will be that much better.
Yes.
So we have about 5 more minutes left, but I want to talk about your book that's coming out, Do What Matters Now, Slow Down to Go Faster in a 24/7 World. The book is not even out yet, and it is already a #1 bestseller on Amazon. So you have pre-sold so many books that it's a bestseller without even being published. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. It's exciting. I am proud of what's going to be released later on this year.
Yeah. So give us if you can give us some, maybe 3 tips from the book that we can look forward to. And then we'll make sure that we put the link in this chat, and make sure everyone that's listening to this pre-record or record or at a later date, you can definitely get access to some freebies from Tamie.
Awesome. One of the most important things that I'll be sharing is about slowing down. Again, the execution is important, but what would happen if we slowed down in our day between Zoom calls and took a breath and set our intention for the next call? If it was down from 60 minutes to 50 minutes, we could be more focused and getting a solution. So when we rush, we actually lose efficiency, and we lose out of the day the things we want to accomplish. So slowing down our conversations with people and being present, slowing down our transitions from work to home. We're harried, and a lot of working from home, the transition is just walking through the door right behind me. It's not a commute anymore to sort of shift our brain. Slowing down the transition helps us be present at home. And again, that burnout, if we're always on and not taking time to slow down and have a rest for 10 minutes, slowing down in the conversation, say if they're, I have this conversation a lot with corporate clients. If we're addressing some conflict and we're concerned about that, or if setting a boundary is going to create, you think, some conflict, slow down in that conversation. Allow yourself to feel confident in what you're getting ready to say, and allow yourself to provide a solution if you're going to say no to somebody. Slowing down your response to saying yes, taking a pause. You have full permission from me and Lisa, I'm sure, to say, hey, thank you for asking me that. I'm going to think about that I'll get back to you in an hour. I'll let you know if I can do that. Take our power and our sense of choice back. Give them 24 hours, because we want to detach, as Lisa said earlier, from the cultural norms, the societal expectations that everything Are they really, if they're really sincerely asking, you can say no, or you can, and if you feel like setting a boundary has to be aggressive, it doesn't. It can be so subtle and go, gosh, right now my calendar is full. And you can make it a yes if you want to say yes in a way and say, but I could do this next week. The client that was just asking me for something the first of last week, I said, gosh, I do want to help you. We can have a conversation about me coming into another agreement of some kind, but it'll be next week. That was challenging for me because I had never had that long of a boundary, but I challenged to disrupt the pattern of what had been for 5 years. And then when you get that time to say, gosh, I'm going to think about this. And the question that came in before, I think from Sharon, was about, but when it comes to setting boundaries, does that appear like we're not as dedicated? So the response, in slowing down our response, it gives us a time to think about how we want to address that. An example could be, well, I want to give you my best work. And right now, these are my priorities. And I can give you my best work next week or next month. And so one way that helps me personally be less detached is to give them a yes of some kind and know that I'm still fulfilling something, but I'm also staying true to what I can really do to keep my well-being and my calendar protected.
I love that. And I'm glad that we're addressing the toxic workplace kind of scenario. So, what would one do? What advice would you give if they are working in a toxic workplace where it's 24/7? It's almost like the culture of 15 years ago. I want to say it was so cool for startups and, .comers to be working 24/7, 7 days a week. It was like, you were uncool to leave the office early. What if you're in that culture right now? What do you do?
You do some self-reflection. You step back. This is part of the slow down chapter in the book. Step back and assess, is this the right fit for you long term? And if it is, then work within the system to try to influence it. The way we can influence the system is to challenge with the questions. If I am able to produce these results in 6 hours a day, are you okay with that? Are you okay with that? Because
why not? Yeah, right.
Do you want me to do it in 10 hours? If I could do what I'm doing in 10 hours and 6 and actually be better results, you cool with that?
Totally.
We get really, we get into this feeling of we don't have choice. We do have choice. We can leave. We can create change. The other subtle thing we can do is communicate in advance. Hey, from this time to this time, I'm in focus mode and I'm not taking any calls. What we've come to is this boundaryless and communication. It's unlimited and it's boundaryless because of our technology. And so we can let technology work for us by turning off notifications, but we also need to communicate with the humans and say, when I had an office and I worked in the corporate environment, I actually put a sign on my door and I just let people know, this is my work time. And we have stand-up meetings every morning. I'd say this is my work time from 1 to 2. But it doesn't just change, and you don't create influence by doing it once. You have to stay committed to it. And that can be the hard part sometimes because you're kind of bouncing up against the cultural ways that are really ingrained. So it's going to take some time. Give yourself some grace and some patience. But if you set some small boundaries and be that model, but also challenge and make sure that when we're measuring for performance, we want to measure for performance and not celebrate hours. I have an organization that I work with that they let their hours be known to everybody. It's a small organization. And so I challenge that. Why? What message does that send if we're focused on hours? Focus on result. Now, I saw a statistic recently, and I'll wrap up with this, is that sales went up 37% when salespeople were rated themselves as happy and less stressed. 37%. If you want X sales in your company and your salespeople could accomplish that in 5 hours a day, they could go live their great life, their best life outside of work, be refreshed, build relationships for bringing in new business, having fun, being light. They could come in, do another 5 hours the next day. Why does that matter? Because of our paradigm of more is more. So we want to challenge that paradigm.
I love that. And there's also the stat, I think it takes 30 days to create a good habit or create a bad habit. So it'll take 30 days to create these habits, good habits, to create boundaries. So just start today.
Start today. It takes some time. And those stats on how long it takes to create boundaries as a mindset coach, I think it takes longer. You can set the boundary, but to keep it integrated continually takes work and commitment and being very clear about why you're doing it in the first place. Why are you doing the work you're doing? And not losing sight of what you're trying to accomplish by trying to do all the other things that people are requesting of you.
Tamie, thank you so much for all of your wisdom, and can't wait to actually get my book. I pre-ordered it, and congratulations on your success. And we'll get even more tips from that. And thanks for being a female disruptor.
Glad to be. It's changed my life to disrupt the norm and to challenge status quo, not just to challenge it for the reason of challenging, but to really impact my home life and my work life. And I'm happy to be a female disruptor in this group and share that.
Well, we will for sure have you back for a workshop or another event. And for everyone, thank you for joining the session, and we will see you at the next session. Thanks, Tamie. And for everybody that's joining in the live audience, we're going to stay on a little bit longer. We'll cut this part out. But if anybody has any questions, Tamie, if you're good on time,
yeah.
Marlene, you can just put it in the chat if you have any questions for Tamie, or I can allow you to talk. Actually, I'm going to put on allow talk now if Marlene wants to talk. Let's see. She tried to.
That's funny. When it comes to boundaries, I blocked out till 2:30 Central just for this reason. So I had the time for this. That's another trick, is to on things that are hell yeah for you, block a little bit more time.
Yeah, that's a great tip. So Marlene, you're on mute if you're trying to talk, so you just have to unmute yourself. But anybody else in the meantime have any questions about boundaries or burnout or Tamie's coaching or her book?
Tamie, it was great. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And it's interesting because I'm in the legal profession, and time is such an issue. And I feel like I've had this conversation with the people in my office, and I was the only one who's thought my value is not based on the hours I'm here. But it's a hard culture to break through, especially in the legal profession, that, like you said, people posting or bragging about their hours. That was a good point.
Yes, it's celebrated culturally, and it causes us to want to be our need as humans to be included and to belong. We just let ourselves be a part of that, and I think, well, what do we really want to belong to? Oh, hey, Marie Vega Byrne.
Tamie, do you have any clients that are attorneys that have the same problem? Because I think attorneys, and also I'm going to say like the tech world is all, this just, it's a bragging point to pull an all-nighter to write code or.
Well, actually the client I was speaking with that I let go of, one of them is an attorney by trade. So that's the mindset there. So the question is, what about how to overcome that? Is that the question?
Well, I think what Marlene was saying is that that's her culture at her, for the legal industry in general, and how to overcome that. I mean, we talked a little bit about it, but I can see how, when everything is hourly already, you can't really change that.
That's the thing. Yes. In my coaching business, it's not an hourly compensation that I've set up for myself, because the value that I bring can't be quantified in an hour. And in that industry, tech and legal industries, that's how they work, is, the value, but our value and how much value we bring to others, the impact we bring to others, and our personal value cannot be measured by time. And one thing, and I'm not very familiar with the legal industry, and I imagine they've thought about charging by the project, but that is charged by value. What if they charge by value? A mentor of mine that Lisa and I share in a relationship with, we know him, he really challenges about that, and make sure that when we are pricing something, we price it based on the value somebody receives. And as a solopreneur or a business owner, to not think about, or to let ourselves think beyond, well, what do we think our value is that we bring? Check in with other people. What value are they getting? The coaching is changing people's lives that I'm doing with them. And if I, in just structurally, if I set up my business by the hour, I tap out. We all tap out if we set up our businesses by the hour. So now I'm sort of speaking to a smaller subset of people here when it comes to people that are structuring their payments. I don't want to get too far into that and leave this out.
We're kind of behind the scenes now, but I'll just add to that. And if there's any other questions, we'll take them. If not, we can wrap it up. But I've always had the mindset of not charging hourly, where in the agency world, that's more of the norm. Like, how many hours is it going to take? Well, that's something you can track internally for your own, but you don't have to let a client know that it's going to take X amount of hours, because, in the creative world, like, something can take me, a half hour to come up with, but it's going to have, hundreds of thousands of dollars of value to the end, the output, the client. So I've always charged what you're talking about is, like, what is it how much is it value to the client? They're not going to buy something even, for a minimal amount if they don't want it. So if it's something that they really need and they want that, they know they're going to get the outcome. So I think that is, just something, if you're a young entrepreneur starting out, the value system in the hour isn't really there if you're delivering some sort of an output, like an overall project, right?
Yes, exactly.
So, okay. And then Marlene is saying it's not taking account of your experience and knowledge, right?
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that briefly. When we are doing the work we're here to do, and we're doing stuff that is doing our genius work, it comes easy to us. So we can place a low value on that. So the work I was doing before with the consulting, that was more of excellence. That was work that I enjoyed doing, but I didn't really love it and get fulfillment out of it. That's one of the reasons why I let that client go, because it wasn't a fit for me anymore. It was at one time. But when we are giving our genius, it feels easy to us, so we can undervalue it. But we want to think about the value, like Lisa said, to the client or to the customer. And
I just saw this one other question from Allison. If you have maybe one more minute, what are some of the symptoms of burnout?
Well, stress, exhaustion, little big health issues, or little niggling health issues, not able to sleep anymore when you once could sleep, excessive worrying. There are so many symptoms to burnout. It could be emotional burnout, when we don't feel emotionally sort of stable anymore, or we're easily upset. It could be mental burnout, where we feel like we can't focus anymore on what we're doing and give our best attention and focus to the things right in front of us. Could be physically, could be a spiritual burnout, where we just aren't connected anymore to the thing we're doing.
I think one other important point about burnout, there's a lot of different physical and mental symptoms that are symptoms for burnout, but burnout leads to depression. So if you feel like you have some of these symptoms of burnout, definitely address them, because the next step is depression, clinical depression.
Yes. And if you have some niggling health issues that are going on and they seem like they're just no big deal, reflect on that. Stop and think about that. That's this part of the slowdown of the book. Slow down, check in with your body. Oh my gosh, that's what was happening to me last year. Some digestive issues that seemed pretty common for most people, but they weren't for me. And it seemed like, I was involved in the wellness industry for years and years before I started coaching. And this stat still holds true because I check on it every now and then. 70% of our health is related and impacted by stress. 70%. And because I know that, I wrote an article on it for the person that I worked for at the time when I was back in the corporate environment. I stopped to go, oh, I'm having some digestive issues. Oh, let's look at the calendar I have right now. Let's look at all that I'm taking on. So yeah, stress and busyness definitely impacts our body, and in very subtle ways that we can write off as nothing until they're not subtle anymore. I think the stat with women's and heart disease, number one killer is heart disease. Well, it's our heart. It's our stress accumulates there. We can become hard, and that can impact our physical heart when our emotional heart is stressed and taxed.
So true. And just to add to, burnout leads to depression. The next step from depression is potentially suicide. So we need to take care of ourselves, especially as women. And Tamie, thank you so much for joining and having this very important conversation that really needs to keep going.
It really does need to keep going. If you're having dark thoughts, if you don't know that there's a way out, what I understand from personal experience and from research and working with people is that we don't want to die, but we want a way out.
Thank you again, Tamie, and we appreciate you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your boundary setting and all of your tips, and can't wait to see your book.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, everybody.